Again, my name's Reid. I've been here in the Ag Econ department at Kansas State University for over 9 years now, a little over 13 years with K-State Research and Extension. So farm policy has been something that I've really enjoyed following and looking at and helping put together materials to help farmers make decisions between these commodity titles or commodity programs in Title I. So I'll be starting out today, hopefully be sharing some information that'll be helpful as you make this decision by March 15th. I would like to recognize too, we also have Todd Barrows and Emily Evans from the Kansas Farm Service Agency office that are on. So as you have questions or at the end of the presentation here, they will be helping answer some of those questions if it's more administrative than educational. So with that, we're going to dive right in. We have a lot of material to get through today. Hopefully, again, getting you everything you need to help you make this decision. So to start out with, I just wanted to look a little bit, show you where we're at in this Farm Bill process. As you know, we extended the 2018 Farm Bill until September 30th of 2024. So that gave us one more chance to make a decision between ARC and PLC, the way they are currently structured, before we hopefully have a new Farm Bill. I'm sure the question at hand is, will we have a new Farm Bill? And it is very tough to pass a Farm Bill in an election year. I know there are people right now working hard to put that together, but just the reality of the political environment right now, there's a lot of work to do yet before a new Farm Bill would be rolled out. So will there be another extension? That is definitely a possibility on the table, but fundamentally, I don't know that the Farm Bill we're operating is really having any fundamental flaws. We will definitely be seeing some challenges in the ag economy going forward, and we will see if this Farm Bill does have the support system it needs for farmers. One thing I always like to mention too, crop insurance being really the fundamental risk management tool for farmers and ranchers, that is permanently authorized. So even if we do have a lapse in the Farm Bill, crop insurance will not be going away, as is the food assistance, the SNAP program. Now, as we talk about a new Farm Bill, I just want to mention a couple things that are being kind of talked about as far as possible changes. Most of what we're hearing is just kind of a status quo Farm Bill, meaning just some small tweaks to what we have now, but nothing revolutionary. So there is a desire to raise the PLC reference prices. They actually did that this year already just because of something that was built into the 2018 Farm Bill. So those naturally went up a little this year. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But in a desire to raise those even more to provide a better safety net for farmers. There's also talk of a base acre update. Now, we reallocated in 2014, but actually updating base acres to match planted acres is something we have not done in a very long time. And then the Farm Bill debate comes back to the food versus the farm. So one thing I wanted to point out just fundamentally in this Farm Bill, when we negotiated the 2018 Farm Bill, they always do a 10-year projection of what this is going to cost. Back then, that projection was $867 billion for the 2018 Farm Bill. The latest projections on the Farm Bill that they were looking at in 2023, that went up to $1.46 trillion. So the Farm Bill has gotten considerably more expensive. Now, most of you probably know what makes up the Farm Bill, but before I jump into commodity title, I just want to talk broadly about the Farm Bill. Really, what we have, nutrition spending projections for this next Farm Bill, the way that it's looked at right now, we're going to be spending about 84% of this next Farm Bill on the nutrition title. Now, there's some reasons for this. This was a significant increase from 2018. A lot of this is due to just food being more expensive these days. What is happening in the background is USDA has what they call the Thrifty Food Plan. So basically a mathematical formula for how do they calculate what it takes to feed a representative family. So A husband and a wife between 20 and 50 years old with 2 children is a representative family. And as all of you know, as well as I do, going to the grocery store these days are a lot more expensive than it used to be. So naturally, by updating that thrifty food plan, it just made this farm bill much more expensive. Going forward, every 5 years, that food plan will be updated. So nevertheless, here we are. Crop insurance, conservation, and the commodity title that I'm going to talk about do make up a significant amount of the other portion of the Farm Bill, and then just a small amount here making up a lot of the other titles that go into the Farm Bill. Now, one thing I mentioned was a base acre update. So I just want to kind of show the picture of Kansas because I think a lot of people often think about the commodities they're planting, but that's not always the commodities that you're making these decisions on as far as ARC or PLC. So here just in the state of Kansas, we have about 50% of our base acres that are still wheat, assigned to wheat. Then we have soybeans in the green here, grain sorghum, and 21% of our base acres are corn. Now, if we updated to what we planted last year, 2023, it would likely, if we updated, be more like a 5-year average. But just hypothetically, if we updated to what we planted in 2023, we're going to have significantly less wheat-based acres and significantly more corn acres and also more soybean acres. So just to kind of keep that in mind, the other thing that I always get asked is, well, I'm planting way more acres than I have in base acres. So the update has talked about being able to match those two things again. And I looked at just on a per acre basis, if we compare base acres with National Ag Statistics Service planted acre numbers, here in Kansas, we're about 80,000 or 800,000 less base acres than we have planted acres. It also gets a little muddy if you think through alfalfa too, and some alfalfa that's been planted on base acres. But we are one of those states that do have less base than planted acres. Now let's dive into what you probably joined this webinar to get a handle on, and that is this program election that we are now going to be signing up for. Just to remind you of the timeline, I know this gets confusing. We're making this election now, and I apologize, that should say the 2024 election. I just caught a typo there. So the 2024 election is going to be made between now and March 15th, 2024, if you haven't already. That payment will not actually be received until October 2025. I will get these slides updated and send that to you. I apologize on that timeline. So the reason that is because we have to go through what is called a marketing year. So for corn, grain sorghum, and soybeans, that marketing year is going to start this September. So right after harvest or right during harvest. And then we have to go through August 31st of 2025 before we determine what that price was for the entire marketing year for these crops. And that's why your payment for this election, again, I apologize, this should say October 2025 is when you will get this payment. For wheat, again, the marketing year, it starts at harvest, so June 21st, 2024, and that marketing year will end May 31st of 2025. Now, one thing to keep in mind is what are your neighbors, what are other producers doing here in Kansas as far as their program elections? And as we look since this farm bill started, there's been a definite trend away from PLC into ARC County. So before wheat and grain sorghum, it was 93% of our base acres were enrolled in PLC. And then as we continued on, now we're over 2/3 just about of our base acres in wheat and grain sorghum are now enrolled in ARC County in this last election period. Soybeans, we have actually never seen a PLC payment from soybeans, even when we had the conflict with China and we had marketing facilitation payments. The lowest we ever got was $8.48. So this program or this commodity has always favored the ARC County program. Corn, kind of following the similar trend as grain, sorghum, and wheat. We used to really favor the PLC program. In recent years, that has now flipped a lot more to Ark County. And the reason for this, obviously, is we've had higher commodity prices. If we're not anywhere close to where PLC is going to pay, the natural thing to do would be Ark County. In the case of having a yield loss, you will receive some payments. If you want to know locally what your enrollment has been like, there's a link on the bottom here. I have maps county by county, crop by crop of what enrollments have been in 2023. All right. So what should, before we make this decision, could we expect any payments this October? And again, this was for the crop we harvested last year. We're in that current marketing year. I would say with PLC, if you're enrolled in that, don't expect to put anything on your cash flow this year. The latest WASDE estimates are here, and you can see compared to the effective reference prices for PLC last year, we would have a long ways to fall before we would hit any of these PLC reference prices. And we're just too far into the marketing year for that to really happen at this point. But if you are enrolled in Ark County, depending on where you are in the state, I would very much anticipate some Ark County payments in October this year. And that is just because obviously we've had some more yield challenges. We've had ongoing drought, and obviously we've had some places that did not make their yields again this year. So you can see the Ark County benchmark, and this was last year, compared to what WASDE is projecting for the marketing year average this year. And then what I've highlighted is how far does the county yield have to fall before an Ark County payment is triggered. And you can see for a lot of crops, that's anywhere from 65 to 75%. And I just gave you an example here. So let's say a county has 150 bushel benchmark corn yield. They would need a yield less than 107 bushels an acre to start kicking in an Ark County payment. That is obviously very possible in a lot of areas of the state, especially soybeans up in my area. That really hot, dry week last year really hurt some of our soybean yields. So I would anticipate Ark County payments again this October for the harvested crop last year. Now, as we're making this next decision, I like to remind people again just what are the options and what are the advantages and disadvantages. I've talked a lot about PLC and Ark County. Those are the two most every producer is looking at. But I do want to recognize there's this individual option on the agricultural risk coverage. The disadvantage is that's paying on 65% of your total base acres, and all your commodities get combined into one guarantee with that option. So most producers are choosing between these two, and that gives them the flexibility that we can say put corn in PLC, put wheat in Ark County or soybeans in Ark County, and you can also make these decisions by Farm Service Agency number. So if you have multiple farm numbers, you can put PLC corn on one farm and Ark County corn on another farm, as long as they're separate Farm Service Agency serial numbers. And these again will pay on 85% of your base in those commodities. Jenny Eft is going to be on here in just a little bit talking about the supplemental coverage option. Again, that's something that does affect your commodity choice because you cannot enroll or have that endorsement on your individual crop insurance if you are in Ark County with that commodity. Now, just to review quickly what these two programs are, PLC price loss coverage is just what it says. So it triggers when the national marketing average price falls below the reference price. Now, again, this national price is determined for the entire year after harvest, and that gets compared to the reference price. Paid on 85% of base acres, and then your individual farm program yield. The advantage of this program, it has a much higher cap. It will keep paying until it hits the loan rate. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. If we really see prices falling, this is going to be the program that offers the best support. Now, for 8 years or more since the 2014 Farm Bill, these have been our reference prices. Maybe the most exciting thing about the presentation today is we have new reference prices. And again, that's not because we had a new farm bill. That is because there was an escalator built into the 2018 Farm Bill that if certain historical price conditions were met, these effective reference prices would increase. Now they can't go too high, don't get too excited. They can only go 115% of what these statutory prices are, but they have increased with that formula for corn, grain, sorghum, and soybeans for this next year. Unfortunately, wheat, that run up in prices has been a little more short-lived since the conflict in Ukraine, and the conditions, the historical prices are just not kicking that formula up yet. I would anticipate next year we might be able to see that 550 increase. But nevertheless, corn, $4.01, grain sorghum, $4.06, and soybeans going from $8.40 to $9.26 per bushel. Now, again, a quick review of agricultural risk coverage. This is a revenue program, much like crop insurance. So there's a price component, which is a 5-year Olympic average of the marketing year averages nationally of the last 5 years, and then also a Olympic average of your own county yields. So that sets the guarantee. If the current year's yield and current year's marketing average price fall below 86% of that, we start getting a payment. And again, that's a county-based trigger. The bad thing about this program, the maximum payment is hit pretty quickly once a payment starts kicking in. This also is paid on 85% of base acres. Both of these programs, again, are base acres and not planted acres. So we do have higher prices for this program again this year because historical prices have been higher. So corn is at $4.85, grain sorghum $5.01, wheat $6.21, and soybeans $11.12. Now, of all my slides, this might be one of the most informational for you to help make this decision. So what I've done here is just put in those PLC effective reference prices for the year and compared them to Ark County prices. Now, red are the Ark County benchmarks, but remember, you don't get a payment until you fall 14% or 86% of that. So if we assume the county has an average yield equals their benchmark yield, we would need a corn price of $4.17 to trigger an Ark County payment. So that is 86% of our benchmark. Soybeans, that would be $9.56, grain sorghum $4.31, and wheat $5.34. So you can kind of use these numbers here and compare to, well, will PLC pay quicker or will Ark County pay quicker with a normal yield? I don't know any yields that typically turn out to normal though. So the other thing I've done here is add a couple rows for what would happen with a yield loss or a yield gain. So this row shows us what does the price need to be if our county had a 10% yield loss. So for corn, it's going to pay quicker because remember it's a revenue. So if yield is bad, revenue will be down and the payment will kick in at a higher price. So for a yield loss of 10%, corn will pay at $4.63, grain sorghum $4.79, $10.63, $5.93. Those prices look considerably higher or better than PLC. But what if we have a good year? We're in Kansas, we're kind of due for one of those. What if we had a 10% yield gain? So we had 10% more bushels than our benchmark. Then we're going to need even lower prices to kick in an Ark County payment. $3.79 on corn, $3.92 grain sorghum, $8.69 soybeans, $4.86 wheat. If you look at those prices compared to the PLC reference price, if we have a good yielding year, PLC is going to pay at higher prices than Ark County would. Now, there's another side of the equation, and that is the county yield. So here in Kansas, we've had multiple years of yield challenges. And what I want to highlight is how that affects the yield side of the guarantee. So I grabbed Rawlins County corn as an example. These are the county yield benchmarks for this year, 2024. And you can see in the 5-year history that is setting that Olympic average, there were 2 years in here, the actual reported yields on dryland corn in Rawlins County, 7.2 bushels per acre. That was the county average. Back in 2021, that was 48 bushels an acre. So what this formula does is kind of a band-aid. This takes those actual yields and it replaces it with 80% of the transitional yield of the county. So that's why you see in these 2 years, it plugs that bad year with a 64 bushel per acre yield. Now that helps, but some of these counties that have year over year drought conditions, that benchmark is just going to be a little lower than what we would have seen in the past. So that'll also make it to where more of a normal county yield is going to be harder to kick in a payment. There's going to need to be a yield loss even further than what we would consider normal to kick in a ARC County payment. So I just wanted to highlight that as we go forward. Now, let's just walk through what are the price projections, and then I'm going to show you my trade-off spreadsheet for making your own individual decision. So what we have here, Rich Llewellyn every month puts these different price projections together for the marketing year average. I've included the link there on your slides. So last year we were at 883. The year that we're in right now, we're discovering that marketing year, we're somewhere between $7.11 on our estimate and $7.58 on the FAPRI University of Missouri estimate. But those of us that project out even further than that, looking at the futures market, historical basis to the marketing year average, we're looking anywhere between $6.33 and $7 wheat for this next marketing year. Remember, PLC will not kick in until that gets below 550. And one thing I want to just make sure about wheat that you recognize, our Kansas wheat prices here obviously look a lot lower than these numbers, but remember that is a blended price of all the types of wheat across the United States. So that's why some of those higher dollar Pacific Northwest wheat gets combined and makes it look like wheat prices are higher than what we experience here in Kansas. Now this tool, I have put this out every year back into the 2014 Farm Bill, and it is available for every state, every county, every covered commodity that Farm Service Agency releases information for. So as you open it, there's a link down here on your slide set. The yellow, you choose your state, their drop-down menus, you choose your county, choose your commodity. And then some counties have a combined ARC County guarantee, so you just select all. Others have a separate non-irrigated and irrigated guarantee that get blended based on your historical irrigation percentage. So that program yield, again, that'll be your individual farm yield. You can type it in there. So I'm looking here, obviously, Rush County wheat. The county yield average benchmark this year is 47.21 bushels. Again, the ARC County price, 621. You can see my benchmark as you multiply those out, and then 86% of that is our revenue guarantee. Again, PLC will kick in at 550. So this first column shows all of the marketing year average prices that could occur in this next marketing year. If you remember, we were predicting anywhere between $6 and $7 right now. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty between now and the end of that marketing year. At that price, you will see PLC payments will not start kicking in until we get below 550 here. And you can see how those payments grow as the marketing year average price falls. Now, the rest of the table are ARC County payments. So if we have an average yield, 47 bushels here in Rush County wheat, we will not see an ARC County payment until we fall down in here. It's actually $5.34 before we see an ARC County payment. But if again we have a lower county yield, we will start seeing payments at higher marketing year average prices. So if you're worried about price falling again, ARC County will provide some assistance up until $29.32 per acre. And again, that's paid on 85% of your wheat base acres. It would take a price below 472 for the PLC payment to be higher than that maximum ARC County payment. One question in the chat here, where do I find my program yield? That is something established with your farm service agency. So it's tied directly to your farm service agency number, that particular farm. It does not change year to year. So you'll be able to contact your FSA office and get that number for your own farm. There, I forgot I had that on there. This just highlights where our price expectations are. Now let's look at corn. Again, we're projecting somewhere between $4.50 and $5 for this next marketing year. Boy, I did not proof this well. That should say 2024 to 2025 marketing year. I compare that to 401. That's above where we would see reference prices or PLC prices kicking in. But let's just look at Brown County corn here for an example. So we have 192 bushels as our guarantee. That here in this column, we would need, again, a price below 417 to kick in an ARC County payment. PLC payments, they will start here at 401. One thing as we look through here is also talking about irrigated base. So I'm going to flip this over to irrigated base in Brown County. Now, the chances of a yield loss on an irrigated base are going to be quite less. So if we have 240 as our benchmark, we would have to drop to 192 to start seeing some payments at higher prices. And if you have both irrigated and dryland base, or historical irrigation percentage on your corn base is how I should properly say that, those two things can blend out as well to where you'll have an ARC County payment on dryland corn but not irrigated. But when your historical irrigation percentage blends those two together, it can sometimes wash out a dryland corn payment because an irrigated payment is not happening. So keep that in mind as well. All right, I'm going to go a little faster now. Grain sorghum, we're the only ones putting a projection out there. Again, this should be 2024, 2025, somewhere around $5 possibly. Would have to fall below 406 to get a payment. And kind of sounding like a broken record here, Haskell County grain sorghum's my example. We would need a lower price, obviously, to get a PLC payment. At an average county yield, we won't see an ARC County payment either until we get below 431. But a lower yield, higher prices will kick in a payment and vice versa. Finally, soybeans. We're projecting anywhere between $11 and $12 this next marketing year. Compare that to $9.26 to start a PLC payment. Again, we have yet to see a PLC payment on soybeans, and I sure hope this is not the year for that. But this has always lent itself a little more to ARC County just because with this higher $11.12 guarantee, it won't take as much of a yield loss to start seeing a payment at higher prices. Now, in conclusion, before I turn it over to Jenny here, I would say number one thing, I hope none of you get any of these payments in the 2024-2025 marketing year. That means prices didn't fall, county yields were good. That is really the best way that we come out of this selecting these programs. But things are a little different than they've been in the past. We're seeing lower commodity prices and higher input costs. It does remind me back of 2014 when we made these decisions and we were coming off of high commodity prices, but the guarantees were good. So I think fundamentally the decision that you're making, PLC is going to offer better price protection. Again, it sets that price floor. You're going to get payments down to the loan rate. So if you're worried about where these prices are going, how low they might go, PLC is not a bad decision for that reason. ARC County may be more likely, especially dryland crops. We've seen some very large ARC County payments because of the drought the last few years. But again, if we see prices really fall, it's going to hit that maximum payment quite quickly, and that's the end of what you will get paid under ARC County. The other thing is SCO. If you want to use supplemental coverage option, you cannot do that if you're enrolled in ARC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. I will answer some individual questions in the chat as Jenny's presenting, and then we will both come on and answer some questions together.